Hi, Sarah.
Hey again, Louise.
I beat you to it.
I know. It's a race. Okay, so here we are. Our final discussion of I Would Meet You Anywhere by Susan Kiyo Ito.
Yeah.
Gonna miss this book. It was so good, Susan. Wow.
Susan, her best writing, I mean, the whole thing was written well, was the last couple chapters here.
Ah,
Or maybe I'm so into it, but we have to pace ourselves for this thing. Like everybody else gets to blow through it.
mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of glad because each word, like I look forward to it and then we really reflect on that section. It
And
was
we can
really
savor it,
favorite.
and more and then like it's the way we do it is it savors it.
Yeah, it really does. Well, I had an aunt, is what we're starting, aunt or
Mm.
aunt, depending on where you live.
I mean, yeah.
It's new.
Here in the Midwest, we say aunt.
Yeah,
But then I also have, many years of California and New
yeah,
York
I know.
sprinkled in. So I never would say auntie though. That would not be my style.
No, it's not my style, but we know people who say auntie.
Mm-hmm.
So I have
Yeah.
an aunt. And
Or an aunt.
so Susan has we finally find out she finds her birth father,
Yes.
but there's a twist.
And 36 months prior, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
3 years prior, he had died. So,
How
sh-
often do we hear this?
oh, so much.
I was thinking how many guests have told us, oh, I was 2 years too late, 1 year
Mm-hmm.
too late, 6 months too late. This is what non-adoptees don't really get, that it is a
Kept,
time race,
kept,
kept
kept
people.
privilege. Yeah. That it's just not comprehensible. I don't think it's ever even thought about, until we bring it up.
Yeah. She had some incredible lines in here. Like she went on Ancestry and had been on Ancestry DNA sites and had a friend who was helping her with the matches and everything like that, who's texting her one night, like, where are you? We have a second cousin. And a second, anything in the DNA is like the second thing is, what did she say? It's like the gold standard. Like
Yeah, yeah.
now you're in, you can track it down. And I didn't remember the part. Okay, so her biological father, I guess there was a mention in the something that happened in her adoption where it was like a funeral. He was a funeral home director. She got that somehow. I never really
Okay, yeah,
clued into that.
that was in her like non-identifying information,
Oh,
I think.
right.
But also what was so interesting was that Yumi had told her, was it Yumi that told her that he had been married with 3 kids,
Mm-hmm.
that he asked about her, all these
Right.
years, and none of that would turned out to be true unless we don't know. We don't know we don't know what Yumi
Remember?
actually maybe she thought it was him and
Yeah.
we don't that's a mystery that we don't have the answer to even finishing the book. We don't know what
Susan doesn't know.
right.
But Yumi never said to her, well, anyway, okay, so it, it is really, this is why you'll never really know your whole story.
Mhm.
But when she finds out about
Elizabeth or finds
Elizabeth,
the aunt, yeah.
yeah, she finds the aunt, and right away she says, "Welcome to the family," without
Right.
even knowing. I mean, just seeing her face. They had the same round face and almond nose or whatever. And she said, "Welcome to the family." And in all the years she had been going back and forth with Yumi, she had never actually had that. And it was instantaneous with an aunt who hadn't even proved it yet through a
Right.
test.
And then they did take the test.
Yeah.
I think even at one point Yumi said something about, yes, we're biological, but it's complicated family or something that
Mm-hmm.
even, you're not like basically telling her you want to be part of this family and
You keep pushing to be part of this
you keep pushing
family,
to be part of this family.
which is so awkward. It makes you feel so weird. And here's this aunt, welcome to the family.
Yeah.
You look just like us. I know you anywhere. And her biological father didn't have other
He didn't have
children,
any other kids. Yeah.
and he would have welcomed her. She thinks, the aunt thinks, and would have wanted kids, and she was just so welcoming. And they were called. Her last name was the Cranes.
The cranes, which, is such a running theme with through the
Crane.
book with,
Yeah.
the origami and
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
And then yeah,
yeah.
so she did write to Yumi
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was, you did not go well.
No, Yumi pretty much was like, you've crossed the final line or whatever.
Hmm.
Good for you, like stay out of, now you have everything you need, move along type of
Yeah.
thing. And it's
Yeah.
like, wow. And she read that. This is always interesting how life is, right? She read her email while she was meeting her aunt. So those conflicting feelings of like reading, like she felt so guilty, but this is actually so wonderful. She goes
A
through the,
joyous
yes,
occasion, then marred by,
yeah,
somewhat marred by the harshness of Yumi. Just can't, Yumi
yeah,
was so, I don't know, emotionally cut off, just, wouldn't emotionally stingy with
yeah,
Susan.
stingy. That's a good word. Hold.
Emotionally stingy.
And
Um,
then the other thing that really struck me in this, and I was thinking that you would have this as well, is just that she always was trying to be more Japanese or feel Japanese or inherit, her parents were Japanese
she never felt Japanese enough.
enough. And she kind of forgot she was half white. And now she's got this like, they fought in the Civil War, the whole
Right.
family history that's white, the Cranes in the small town and the Civil War and all. And they were also military people like her
Uh-huh.
father. And she had never considered all this. Like she had, but not really. So
Because
it's,
it was so focused on the Japanese part because raised by two Japanese
yeah,
parents, her mother was, Yumi Japanese, so it just wasn't part
yeah.
part of her life. So yeah.
And she had this experience that I had with my own aunt recently, actually, my biological aunt, where her aunt said, I would have kept you and raised you and loved you. And which is so, I mean, first of all, my
Yeah.
aunt said that too. It's so loving. But then she also had that guilt of, I don't even know if it's guilt, but that weird thing that adoptees have. We
Well,
live in two worlds. Go
right. And
ahead.
I highlighted,
Hmm.
she said, my heart split. On the one hand, her welcoming kindness, she would have taken me in. On the other hand, my entire life, growing up with my Japanese American family, swept away. My childhood vanished. The
Mm,
mint green house on Summit Street, I was in a tsunami floating away from the foundations of my known life. Her words were kind, but my heart was shattered. And
mm.
this is what we talk about all the time.
Yes.
This is why I highlighted. It showed just how random my life was. How I could have so easily not existed at all if Yumi had had the resources and courage to find an abortionist, or how I could have ended up being raised by a completely different family, my
Hmm.
genetic family, or by someone else, anyone else. I
That's
mean,
a,
we
we talk.
always talk about
I knew you
this.
were gonna see that too. I just felt like that. I felt like that's the crux of this book right there. And then because it would erase her other life where she loved her parents. I mean, 17 years, her mom moved in with them and was grandmother and
Uh-huh.
so close to her dad, and they were loving and wonderful. And then here, what is this loving aunt? So at first you're like, oh, that's so neat. And then you're like, wait, is it like you're not really anywhere. It's so
It's
strange.
funny because right before on the way home I was talking to Becker, my son,
Mhm.
and it came up and I said, "Well, you have kept privilege." And he goes, "Well, what is that?" And and I've talked about you don't it like it doesn't occur. You grew up with mirroring. We were talking about how
Right.
his girlfriend had said he and his dad like
Oh my God, they're so
how
similar.
they're
Yeah.
so similar
Yeah.
um and like people like me that weren't kept didn't have mirrors. We didn't have, we were just randomly placed in families that we have no genetic connection to, oftentimes nothing in common with, nothing,
Mhm.
that's so I said it's random. It's completely random. And so we were just talking about it on the way before
That's
you and I hopped on.
That's so interesting. Bill and I had this conversation ourselves too. He was like, well, can anybody have that? I said, not really. This is so specific to this culture, to us, to our group.
Hmm.
Yeah. What did Becker say? Was he just like, wow, I have to think about that? It's like,
Yeah, well, but what he did say was like, well, then I wouldn't be here, is
right,
what he
right,
said, had it. He's
right.
like,
And we don't want any of that. Like, I
it's
don't want to
not, yeah,
be,
I was like,
no.
that wasn't, like, of course, I understand that,
Hmm.
but the system is messed up. That's what I was having that conversation with him about. But
Well, and then the adoptee has to balance the feelings of it all. So, like,
mm-hmm.
you know, it's it's so nice to be wanted by another family and loved that's your family genetically. But then you also had a whole life, which if you switch any sliding doors, is your friends, it's you and I,
Yeah.
it's our children. I mean, nobody would change that. But it would be nice if we could help the next group along the way,
The
not
next,
have to do
yeah,
this,
not have to
right?
go through this.
Which
Yeah.
kind of leads to the next
Well, and
chapter.
then this we didn't finish because
Hmm.
the sad part of the chapter
Oh
was
gosh.
Elizabeth dying. So Susan had a
Hmm.
short period of time with her, but a really, really loving
Yeah.
period of time with her.
Yeah. Oh, she
And
talked
and then the
about, yeah.
family welcomed her. The rest of the
Yes.
family welcomed her. So
At the
she's,
funeral, everyone
yeah,
was
and then
loving.
yeah, and she's in touch with them because
Yeah.
this was all very recently. Because then we get to, well, she gets the next
Her,
chapter's got OBC.
I
She
like that. Got OBC, got your
got
original birth
OBC.
certificate. And there's a line in here. She said something. I've been waiting 66 years or something for my, she's, you're in a, this is how old we are to get our original birth certificate. It's so strange to me. Like
I
even
know.
reading it, it's weird to me. It always, because
Well, and I
she already
like that she
knew
brought up
everything.
Georgia Tan.
Me too.
I had
Me,
a conversation at work this morning with a couple of people who about adoption. One guy had an adopted older
mhm.
brother. He was like, "Oh, he had a great life." I'm like, "Okay, I'm not gonna try to explain this to him," but I did try to explain. Well, here we didn't go, don't get our records, our medical history. Everything is hidden from us. All the, this is
Yeah.
in large part due to a woman named Georgia Tan. People
Hmm.
don't know our history.
No, and when she had her birth certificate, she already knew all her who the parents were now.
Hmm.
She knew her name was Mika and all these things, but you still devour it. You read
Right.
everything on it. Like when I got my birth certificate this year, I knew everything, but I stare at it all the time. To me, it's just bizarre to hold in my hands that this
Hmm.
took place. And there was a nice doctor on there, which I thought was interesting. Yumi had said the doctor had been nice to her, and she said, "Well, thank God she had that doctor who she said went on to be kind of someone who helps women with
Yeah.
all sorts of issues." So I don't know. It's so how all of this happened at once for her. Then the last part made me, I was just sobbing in this part.
But
It brought,
well, then when she had her daughter had the baby, and then it's
yeah,
COVID, right?
COVID and just how
Yeah, how recent this was.
and how much that brought up COVID, how cruel it is to old people and to
Hmm. Yeah,
everybody's
I
isolating.
was reading it and just thinking, gosh, if we knew then what we know now, right? Like it wouldn't have had to have been like that.
Right. I mean, because her adopted mom who had been living in the room where now the baby was born,
Yeah.
which made that kind of beautiful because we have a room in our house we call the Columbine room from like we have all these like little cherished things in it, but now her mother, she was sad, had to leave that room and go to an older folks home in her neighborhood.
Hmm.
But then the new baby was born there and they had a little compound going on. And then the mom, couldn't see any. I mean, they could bring the baby to the window and she had a
Yeah, I
mask on. And,
know.
and when you have dementia and all that, you don't understand.
I know. It's what a, oh gosh, so sad.
And
So
her
sad.
mom got so loving at the end. She was just
Yeah.
loving and just wanted to be loved, and they couldn't even touch her. Like she was dying, and they had to all be there with masks on. And she's thinking, for what? Who are
Yeah,
we protecting? She's dying.
I
It just
know.
it was her writing though was so rich. Like now she has this little baby, and she is the most Japanese person in the family now.
Susan
Yeah,
after her mother died. Yeah, so then her mom dies.
yeah.
Um and then she decides, well, she's going to tell Yumi because
Mm,
Yumi used to be in touch with her mom,
yeah. Respected her mom. Yeah,
Yeah. So she emailed her and said, basically, I don't know that you want to hear from me, but here's, she died, and then
yeah.
Yumi wrote her back right away. So
She did.
uh,
And she
and
sent a picture of her granddaughter.
right, of Sequoia.
Hmm.
So
Which would be her great granddaughter for Yumi, right?
Yumi's great granddaughter. Yeah.
And
So that was, I mean, that's where it stands, right?
yeah,
It's still, so it's still I mean, I guess guarded would be.
Yeah.
the right word, you know?
Yeah, she said they started to have the relationship that they had before, the back and forth, but it was, distant and strange, and then nice things, then lots of time would go by, and then her birthday came and went unacknowledged.
Mm-hmm.
Was just it's like the
Right.
same, and we're gonna talk to Susan, but it's
Yeah,
like
well, Susan, yes,
I can't
yeah,
wait.
we do continue the conversation with Susan. So,
Yeah.
I want to give the book a hug
Me too,
because
and
it's
I
kind
want
of,
everybody to read it. I think, how we always recommend American Baby and other books to people.
this is on the list too.
This is on the list because I think it's written so well, and it's such a good, it's like A.M. Holmes' book, right? The
Uh-huh.
Mistress's Daughter. It just
Yeah.
makes you go, oh, like, aha, it's strange, and shows every viewpoint, but written in such a rich way.
Uh-huh.
I'm
I
gonna
mean,
miss it.
it's talented writers,
Yeah. Well,
gift of word with words. Well, we will, Louise, I'll see you in a minute.
I'll see you in a minute.
Yeah.